Hey everyone, hey Seth, hey Donna, how are you doing? It's so nice to see you even from so far. Don't you, everyone, love when Seth is trying to be cool? I love when Seth is trying to be cool, and especially when Seth is failing. It's so nice. All right, so we are going to talk about cloud today, and this is a hello cloud computing world, and it's kind of a play of words on the hello world, which is like you saw earlier on in Chana's presentation, uh, when you saw how you start coding in different languages. And of course, once you start coding in different languages, then you also want to have an environment in which you want to put this code. And this is where the cloud computing can be a good solution. Of course, you're all going to start by running your code on your local machine. And then in many cases, you're going to put your code in a server, which is often running in the same enterprise or in the same location than you are. And this is what we call on-premises when we try to use, some lingo to make us feel smart. So on-premises, is something that is very frequent, but now more and more people are using something which we call the public cloud. And Microsoft Azure is one of the public cloud providers. So welcome in my living room. My name is Laurent Bugnion. I'm a cloud advocate. And I'm going to show you a few things about Azure. And then we are going to do quite a long demo, a little bit of code. So first of all, why is Azure interesting to put your code? For multiple reasons. There are really a lot of places where you can put your code. And that can be really interesting when you want to put, for example, a website as close from your users as possible, because you want to try to avoid having a long response time. Okay, we call that the latency in our lingo. And again, I apologize for that, but you're going to hear quite a lot of new words in this presentation. I'm going to try to define them as we go. So latency is really literally the time that it takes to respond to a request, and it's going to take some time. And even if you have no obstacle at all on the line, you're still going to go at the very least at the speed of light, okay? And even at Microsoft, we didn't find a way to go faster than the speed of light. We tried and we failed. Maybe we shouldn't have asked Seth to do that. Anyway, so speed of light is always a given. So just by moving your application and your data and everything closer to your users, then you're going to reduce this latency. And this is why it's interesting to have many regions, but also because like this, you can have, like, for example, I'm based in Zurich right now. As you can see, it's quite dark around me. It's, I don't know, 7:30 p.m. here. So, even in Switzerland, we have two regions. We have one in Zurich and one in Geneva. And that allows me to have safety because I'm going to put my data, for example, in the Zurich region, but I'm going to put a backup in Geneva. And then like this, if something happens in Zurich, which I really hope not because this is where I live, but maybe a meteorite, strikes, or there is a thunderstorm or whatever, and the data center goes black, then it's going to automatically fall back to the Geneva region, which is why it's important to have multiple redundancies if you want. And you may ask, why do you want to have a region in Geneva? Why not just put it in Germany, for example? Well, because sometimes you can't. There is some data which has to stay on, regional soil, local soil, national soil. And this is why it's important that we have those regions like that. So here you can see that we have, I remember in the days we were trying to say exactly how many regions we have. We totally stopped doing that because it goes so fast and it grows all the time. So we have 60 plus regions, okay? And if you go into a data center, an Azure data center, it may look like that. Actually, it may probably not look like that because here you have someone who is walking, and very often those data centers are just completely empty. Very much of the operation is automated. And this brings you security, because if you don't have anyone on the floor, the risk that somebody unauthorized enters is even lower, okay? So you have higher security, not just from a software standpoint, but also really from a hardware standpoint, where we avoid that people are going to go and steal, hardware. And I gathered a few numbers because I thought it was interesting, but we calculate that using Microsoft Azure can be very efficient from an energy standpoint. And in fact, we talk about 98% more carbon efficient than an on-premise data center. And why is that so? It's because Microsoft is really committed to compensate quite a lot of this carbon. You know that data centers are using a lot of electricity. That's true, but we also invest a lot of money into building renewable energy plants, for example, with wind or with solar or with all kinds of things. And this allows us to have really also a carbon bill at the end, which is good. And there are a few things. Microsoft has been carbon neutral since 2012. We are committed to be carbon negative by 2030. And in fact, we have also a commitment to remove the carbon that we have emitted in the atmosphere since 1975 by 2050. So there are really quite a lot of engagement there. In fact, one thing which was really interesting, I don't know if you saw that, but we even tested putting some data centers underwater. And one thing which is interesting here is that if you put your data center underwater, it's going to take less land. And as you know, land can be a problem, all right? In Switzerland, we have a lot of mountains where we cannot really put infrastructure there, so that can be tricky. So I thought it was interesting to mention that this data center, you see that there is a lot of algae and all kinds of like shells growing on it. It's been 2 years underwater. So if you're interested, check the news. There is a lot of things here. Now, somebody in the chat earlier on mentioned acronyms, and yeah, oh God, do we love acronyms, you know? And unfortunately, we have a lot of acronyms in the cloud. So we have things like IaaS and PaaS and SaaS and FaaS and what? Well, I even use here. I wanted to use a 3-letter acronym which starts with W and ends with TF, but I didn't because it's recorded, so I didn't do that. Hey, ma'am, you see, I didn't swear. So IaaS is really something we call infrastructure as a service. And this AAS is always as a service, all right? And later I'm going to have a coffee as a service, hopefully. So IaaS, infrastructure as a service, is something we have in the cloud. It's really virtual machines, essentially. Virtual machines is something that you may have used already before. Okay, you have a computer somewhere, and then you have another computer which you use to log into that computer using, for example, a remote desktop client. And, virtual machines are really an easy way to put things in the cloud, because just like you would put an application on a desktop computer, which is in your office, you can do the same in the cloud. It's exactly the same. So a lot of people use that as a first step to the cloud. But one issue that you have here is that it also means that you have a lot of responsibilities. You're going to have to take care not of the hardware, that's Microsoft's job, but you're going to take care of the operating system, for example, of patching it for security, of putting an antivirus on it, of taking care of the networking, like securing your network with firewalls, etc., taking care of the disk. And this is why we often encourage people to move to the next step, which would be PaaS, platform as a service. Things like a web application, for example, where literally we give you the platform, it's a web server, but you don't have to worry about what is around it, like the operating system. You're going to select, okay, I want Windows or Linux, because we support Windows or Linux on what we call app service, which is essentially a web application, a web server on Azure. But you don't have to patch it. You don't have to worry about antivirus, et cetera, et cetera. You can just concentrate on putting your code there, and then it's going to run. Things like SQL Server, for example, we have Azure Sql Database, which is essentially a database, a base of data, okay, a big collection of data in the cloud. Or we also have things like Cosmos DB. Some of you may already have heard about those open source databases, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB. MySQL is very famous. It's the M in the LAMP stack, okay? Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, which is used in a huge number of websites around the world. So we can host that on Azure as well, and that would be a platform as a service. The next one is SaaS, software as a service. And here I'm not going into that, but basically think about Office 365. If you have ever used, for example, Microsoft Word in your web browser, or PowerPoint or Excel in your web browser, it's something like that, meaning that your provider, your cloud provider, in that case, Microsoft, but you have, of course, Azure, Google, etc., take care of everything, including the application, the software that you're using. And you're just responsible for the content that you put in the application. And then we have something FaaS, or function as a service, that we also call serverless. Sometimes there is actually a server. It's just that you don't have to worry about it. And here we have different solutions on Azure, for example, functions, as well as Logic App. And we'll see how the time goes for the demo, but I'm going to try to show you that. So without further ado, let's see a demo. All right. So what I'm going to do is switch or try to switch to my other desktop. Here we go. It worked. Fantastic. And here I am in the Azure portal. It's a website. All right. So you just go to portal.azure.com, you log into your account, and then you are presented with a number of things. And for example, here I have what we call a dashboard. Dashboard is a place where I can put my application, some shortcuts to my application if you wish. For example, here I selected, okay, I want in my dashboard to have a virtual machine, a website, my personal private website, a function application, and a logic app. And at any time, I can go and change that. So I can say, all right, I want to move this here. For example, I want to make it a little bit bigger. And then I can save. And as you can see, this is saved. So you can customize your desktop like that. So let's start with the virtual machine, because I told you this is kind of where people tend to start first. So here I have a virtual machine, and it's running Windows 10. And you may wonder, why do you even use a virtual machine with Windows 10? You seem to be presenting from a Windows 10 machine. Well, the reason is that it allows me to install things that I wouldn't install on my private machine normally, or it allows me to have a totally different operating system. For example, Linux, all right? I can totally run a virtual machine with Linux in Azure. So here, this is a Windows machine, meaning that I'm going to use remote desktop to connect to it. That would be just like you do if you want to connect to another computer which is running in your office. For example, I'm going to request access. This is kind of a security measure that we have, where we say, okay, from my IP address, can you please give me access? And here I was granted access, so I can download the file which is allowing me to start the remote desktop connection. All right, I'm going to enter my credentials for this machine. Here we go. And then like that, I can connect. As you see, this is starting a brand new client. All right, it looks like a brand new computer, but it's actually the computer that I have in the cloud running as a client on my private computer, which is here at home physically with me. And now, why did I do that? Well, because right before you had Chris explaining to you everything about Node.js, and me, I'm totally lost when it goes around Node.js, because I'm more of a .NET person. And recently, I had to run a website which is running on Node.js and do some things with it. And this is a website that we have here in Visual Studio Code. But I didn't really want to install Node.js on my private machine, because it's kind of a big install and I'm almost never using it. So it doesn't quite make sense. So I just did a virtual machine here. And then I decided, all right, I believe that if I type npm Uppsala, I'm going to go a little bit higher. Okay, clear is always a good idea. And then I'm just going to type npm start, and this should start the website. No, it doesn't. Because I had the C, which is remaining from before. Here we go, npm start. And basically it allows me to run a full-blown website in Node, even though I didn't want to have Node on my machine. And so that's one of the advantages of having a virtual machine like that if you want. And of course, there are other advantages to that. For example, if I have multiple clients, if you're in a consulting firm and you have a lot of clients, you can have one environment per client. You have one machine for client A, one other machine for client B, and one other machine for client C, etc., etc. There are really a lot of reasons why people like virtual machines. But like I said, virtual machines are a little bit heavy to manage and to use. And this is why sometimes we prefer to go to platform as a service. And when it comes to websites and web server, for example, this is here my personal private website. And it is running here on Azure in what we call an app service. And so here it means that I selected, when I created this new web server, I said I want it to run on Windows because it's still an ASP.NET application. It has to run on Windows. If I had a .NET Core, I could run it on Linux as well, but I'm kind of in the process of migrating it, and I'm not quite there yet. So one thing which is really nice here is that even though I don't own the operating system and I don't have to worry about it, I also have a lot of monitoring possibilities. For example, here you see, this is my actual website, and you see here, for example, the number of data in. You also see the number of HTTP errors, which is quite annoying. I need to go and check what is going on here. You see that right here, I had 3 errors. And so I have a whole lot of things that I can monitor. Another thing that I can do is that I can take those graphs and put them to my dashboard. Remember the dashboard that I showed you before? So I can say, all right, I'm going to put those 2 here to the dashboard. And if I go back now, then you have the graphs. And basically, this allows you to build some visualization for your bots, for example, quite easily. But even better, we have even better visualization possibilities. And so let me show you that a little bit more. So for example, here I can set up all kinds of things. I can say, if there is a lot of demand on my website and I want to have more power, I can set what we call scale out, which means that instead of having one server running, you see here, I'm going to say, all right, I want, for example, to manually scale to 5 servers. And of course, it's going to cost me more money because I'm running 5 servers, but it means that I'm going to respond to the demand. And so I'm also going to make more money, okay? Or you could say, I want to do a custom auto scale, which means that, for example, if on one of my servers, the CPU, the processor goes higher than 70%, then I want to start another web server. And starting another web server is almost instantaneous. So the risk that you lose some requests is very low. There are all kinds of advantages like that to platform as a service. Another thing is the monitoring. So if I go here into application insights, this is our monitoring solution. Here I have lots and lots and lots of data. For example, I can check live what is happening on my website. Just taking a second to connect. So if I'm in a project, I could run this, for example, in a big project room, on the big screen in my project room. And here you see really in real time what's happening on my website, how many percentage of CPU is used. Here you see the traces which are going on. So people are actually hitting my blog apparently. And I see that really in real time as this is happening. There are tons of things you can do. You can also check the failures. And so like I told you, I had a few failures here. So I will have to go and investigate. And here I see that some of the failures are probably due to people hitting links which don't exist anymore. And so I can handle that by saying, okay, I'm going to do a redirection, for example, etc. So there are a few things that are happening here which I will need to go and check. So again, a lot of really very nice features here, including also things you may have heard about continuous integration, continuous deployment. We totally support that, meaning that you can, every time that you commit something into a GitHub repository, this is going to be deployed automatically. So that's cool, but it's still relatively complex. And a lot of people like to start in something that we call function applications. And function applications mean that you don't even have to worry about the server at all. You just worry about your code. So here I have such an application. Right now, it is completely empty, all right? I don't have anything. I'm going to click on Add, and then I'm going to say how the application needs to start, okay? So this is what we call a trigger. For example, I can say, all right, this is a recurring trigger. It's going to happen, for example, every morning at 8 a.m., all right? For example, if you want to do a backup. Or every Friday evening at 5 p.m. if you want to do some reporting on sales data. Or I could do an HTTP trigger, which means that every time I hit an HTTP, meaning a URL in your web browser, then the code is going to be executed. And as you can see, we have a lot of those different triggers that you can do. So let's create an HTTP trigger. And I'm just going to set this to anonymous. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to call that say hello, all right? And let's create a function. And as you can see, it's going to create code in my web browser. Now, this is not how we usually work. In production, we go into a development environment. Visual Studio Code is great for that. Visual Studio, the full-blown Visual Studio, what we call it sometimes, can work great as well. But here, if you just want to try things out, a quick function, you can do that here. And you're going to have code directly into your web browser. In this case, I selected .NET as an environment. It's more my thing. But you can also use Java, Python, even PowerShell, JavaScript, etc., etc. So here I have something. You see that what it's going to do, and again, it's still code, all right? So you still need to understand the code. It's going to get a name parameter from the query string. The query string in a URL is what comes after the question mark, all right? And then it's going to give me here an answer saying hello name, all right? And this code is already actually ready to run. So I can just go and take the URL, okay? I'm going to paste here the URL in my new web browser. I need to get out here. And the first thing it's going to tell me the HTTP trigger worked fine, but you see you need a name in the query string. And this is exactly the code that I have here, which tells me that, all right? So now I can say, all right, now I'm going to put here, I'm going to say hi to Seth because I was a little bit mean to him. So now I want to say hi. Now it says, hello, Seth. All right, this is cool. And now I can go and change the code. I can say, hello from Zurich. All right, I'm putting something in my code. I'm going to save. I don't need to deploy anything. It's already in the cloud. Okay, so it's basically the meaning of serverless code, meaning that I don't have to worry about the server. And then after that, I'm going to go here and refresh. And now it says, hello from Zurich, Seth, because Seth, you know, I love you, right? And so hello from Zurich. All right. Cool. So this is a serverless function, but you know, it's still code. So I thought that I would show you something which I'm sure Donna will love. It's basically how you can do an application without any code. And this is what we call in Azure a logic app. Logic app is another class of application. It's also serverless. And here I created one. All right. And as you can see, there is a designer, meaning that I'm going to do some graphic programming language, if you want. I'm going to put some blocks together. And so here I have something which is called Microsoft Forms. And Microsoft Forms is something that I can create. You have other such forms who exist as well. You can also connect to those. And here you see, this is, I thought I would help Cassie, who is one of the organizers of this amazing conference. Hello, Cassie. Thank you so much for organizing, by doing a registration form, okay? And so when you have a registration like that, where people go and say, hey, I want to see your stream. And I know here you didn't have to do that, but let's say that you wanted to do that. Then after that, I can get the response detail. And one thing I can do, for example, I can say, all right, I want to send an email. So let's connect to Outlook. And here I'm going to say, all right, I want to send an email. So I'm going to here take the block, which is called send an email. I'm going to sign in into my Outlook.com, into my Microsoft.com account, all right? So this is going to take just a second. And you see how easy that was, right? If I did that in code, I would have to handle the whole authentication mechanism, which would be very, very complicated. And then I'm going to send an email, for example, to myself, let's say. So I'm going to say lbugnion@microsoft.com. And then probably I would have a series of people, including Jenny and Cassie, who are the organizer. And then I would call that, for example, registration, all right? And then after that, I can say, hey, I want to add, for example, the name of the person who registered. And here you see I have this has already been parsed by the logic app. So for example, I have your name, which is one of the questions that I had. And so your name has registered. And as easy as that is going to send something, we could even do some things really fun, like for example, say that every time that somebody is registering, I'm going to post a tweet, all right? And here again, I'm logged into my Twitter account, and I can say, all right, I'm going to, for example, add some text, and the text should be, for example, this person. And so again, I go back, I take your name, has, or says hi from Zurich, for example, whatever, okay? You can just enter something. And then as soon as you're done, you can save that, all right? The logic app is complete. Now I can say, all right, I want to run it. So basically, I want to wait to see what's going on here, all right? And then I can go to my form. This is my trigger. And then I say, Laurent Bugnion, all right? Organization, Microsoft. This one is optional. And then, are you attending? Yes, I will be attending. I'm sending that. Immediately, the logic app is going to detect what happened, all right? Everything worked fine until the tweet. But no problem, I can always go and debug what happened because I have everything here. It's forbidden. It's probably because I was not authenticated properly, but at least the email was sent properly. And like this, you can build a whole registration system without having to worry about code. If you want code, you can add, for example, an Azure function in the middle of that. But if you don't want code, you don't have to worry about that. So you see that even if you don't know how to code, there is something for you on Azure. If you know how to code, then definitely you can also expand your knowledge here, and you can have a whole full-blown environment like that. So if you like this presentation, I want to encourage you to continue learning, all right? You need to keep learning. This is what I do every day. I keep learning all the time. And the best place to start is to take the Azure Fundamental Learning Pass on Microsoft Learn. This is the second link that you have here. Also, if you want to check our documentation, this is here on top, the first link. And if you want to get the slides as well as all the links, you can scan the QR code that you have on the screen, or just go to gslb.ch/startdevchange20. All right, I think the QR code is easier. Thank you so much for attending this session. I hope this was helpful. And I'm going to say in the chat, or you can also ping me on Twitter if you want. My DMs are open. Thank you so much for watching. And I think it's back to you, Saas and Donna. Thank you so much.